But so I know I've got 30 minutes, so I'll try to be concise. But I also want to make sure that I provide enough background information to give you some prompts for conversations around the use of storytelling, and in particular, thinking about the healing power of storytelling within the field, your own professional field as well. Of course, I'm the non-expert in the room about chronic pain, even if I got personal experience with my mom suffering from fibromyalgia, and myself having been involved in a series of research, interdisciplinary research projects on chronic pain that I'm going to touch upon later. So what I'm going to do in the next 25 minutes, let's say, I'm going to share a few theories and practices around what participatory storytelling means, starting from a presentation of the conventional digital storytelling process, which is a very good starting point, thinking about the replicability of this approach. And then we will reflect together about how potentially creative disruptions can make this process, this standard framework that I'm going to share with you, more accessible and effective. And thinking also about the use of storytelling as a process and the stories, the digital stories as outputs to inform both practice and policy. I also like to think about this practice through particular lenses. And one of these is co-creation, which I think is essential when thinking about what is implied within the digital storytelling process, which is a social process, is a social interaction and mutual learning process. And also thinking about the potential outcome in terms of within the social justice spectrum, which is one of the fields, the main field of my research as well. And thinking about a potential challenge of course, digital storytelling is not the panacea to everything, even if we like to think about that. But thinking about the feasibility of applying digital storytelling to inform practice and policy, but also to improve participants' well-being during the process, and also by accessing information through those little videos. So as I said, I'm going to share later this link into the chat, because it's something you may have time and curiosity to have a look at later. It's a very interesting video that tells you a little bit about the history of this global movement that we now recognize all over the places, on all the continents, called digital storytelling with capital D and capital S, that started in the late 90s in California, was prompted by sort of social justice campaign and need of a group of activists and media experts, theater practitioners, around a very charismatic personality, and his name is Joe Lambert. So if you search on the web his name, you will find plenty of information about the work that he and his group at Story Center have been doing over the past 30 years. And I had the privilege to actually be trained by them and discovered this approach that I'm going to briefly describe right now. So what they did, of course, you can imagine in the late 90s, access to technology was not so easy as it is today. But they were working around this opportunity of using filmmaking as a practice, as a creative practice, and expand it in its social dimension. So not thinking about filmmaking as an individual filming and editing a short video, but actually creating a workshop-based model to invite a group of people, that is usually around 10 people, to go through a co-creative journey. And they developed a framework that, generally speaking, goes across 5 or 7 steps, and generally lasts 3 to 5 days. And it involves a sort of translation from a story that is initially shared verbally in what you see here as a step number 1. At that point, we would invite participants to bring an object or a photograph from their own personal archive and share an experience in a narrative form in first person. Then we move towards the translation of what was shared verbally into a short script of around 200, 250 words. And it's already an interesting exercise because in the story circle, as a facilitator, we tend to support interaction, questions, feedback, to really start crafting a narrative and thinking about the key message of the personal story, personal experience, what kind of knowledge that experience can bring into the space, what type of emotions can that experience trigger and prompt into the audience, what kind of actions do we want to prompt by sharing those stories. So all those questions are part of the very early stage of crafting the narrative. So as I said, in what we call the story circle, step one, we then move into a sort of creative writing exercise where a facilitator like me would support one-to-one the storytellers to refine their narrative in a short piece of writing. And then we move into a more technical part, which for some participants is quite an exciting time to refine by recording the voiceover. That is a sort of performative element added into the reading of the script. So thinking about the pace of the voice, the intensity of the voice, the feel of the voice, and then learning how to edit a short film. So what happens in that, and usually is the longer part of the workshop, we would provide access to a very easy to use software for video editing. And the idea is that the individual storyteller would learn and make this short video by themselves with our support, because that's is the time when we really can work also on the untold, the unspoken. So there is very often something we write about, we talk about, but there are little nuances that we can't make emerge, we can't even think to share with others, but they can come out in crafting the, let's say, the visual aspects of the narrative, or even the sound effects, the music, the soundtrack that we want to add to create the mood or different moods in the narrative as well. And then the beautiful, one of the most powerful experience for the participants is the final step. That is the sharing of the story. Very often, the screening of those little 2 minutes video created in this collaborative, co-creative space ends with a public event. And the short films, the 2 minutes MP4 created are screened very often beyond the group of participants. And of course, we need to have a sense of a trajectory in mind as a group during the process and also before, even before starting the process. Who do we want this audience, wider audience, to be? Then what do we want these stories to do and achieve once the process has been completed? Do we want to make those videos online? Do we want to include those videos as a training material, for example, for doctors? Or do we want to inform policymaking? So this is just a snapshot of how the story center model has been developed over time and exported quite successfully. If you have an interest in exploring one of the most successful projects based on digital storytelling in the UK, you may want to have a look at patientvoices.org.uk and also read this book around cultivating compassion that is edited by the two founders of Patient Voices. And they have a very, they had an important role in shaping the input of this process to inform better practices within healthcare. There is one challenge from my experience, as Claire very kindly was describing my experience over the years. There is something that is very difficult to do, and is always to replicate this model in an effective, accessible, and feasible way. And I'm just using this photograph I took one of the first time I went from the UK to the US, thinking about the different characteristics of the process in the US that is much closer to the original model in a story center, and the different applications that over the years have been done, successfully done in the UK. And I like to think about melting ice as the metaphor of somehow the rigidity of the model being the ice and the fluidity of those different applications across different sectors of society that started from the UK, then were spreading out beyond our continent. And I'm going to share later an experience I had even in New Zealand. And therefore, the majority of my work has been around challenging the original method and approach of digital storytelling, not because I don't like it, but I really love it. But to really think about the evolution of this approach in a way that could be meaningful for participants across different sectors of society, and thinking about the role of co-design techniques to inform the evolution of the process itself, and also trying to create a community of practice of new trainees through a train the trainers approach that could expand the impact of the practice itself. For example, today I'm with you here from Italy, where I was invited by the University of Roma Tor Vergata to actually start a process for their researchers in the university to see about the application of digital storytelling within their own field of research, and therefore creating small community of practices around this approach in different academic contexts, social contexts, to reflect together about how to make it through new tools more and more accessible and effective. But going back to the ethos of the practice, which is something that is essential, the ethos that was somehow supporting the development of the original model from Joe Lambert and his group, made by Joe Lambert and his group, there is something I've been emphasizing over and over the more I've been applying this approach. That is about the role of deep and active listening. So very often in shaping a narrative, we think about the storyteller. I like to think about the story listener and what is the role of the story listener in shaping the narrative of the storyteller, and also the interaction of the two in thinking about the impact that a short piece of writing, a short video can have on people. And I'm going to share with you a few examples, starting with this one, so that we can visualize what the digital story is. So what I have described as the workshop model is the process of digital storytelling. What I'm going to show you now is the output, so the digital story. And by doing this now for many years, I can tell you that the output is not always meant to be built and created going through all the 5 steps as they were described before. So a digital story is, in short, a first-person narrative in the form of a short video around 2 to 3 minutes, in which a voiceover is combined with images, text, and sound. But what is important to think about is the message that the storyteller is trying to make emerge through their own personal experience, thinking about a particular audience. And I'm going to share this video that I hope will give you a better idea of what a digital story is.
Antonia, we can't hear the sound of this video.
Even if I share the video.
What I would do is if you unshare your screen,
yeah,
and then when you click share, once again, on the right hand side, it has the option to share sound.
Yeah.
If you could tick that box, and then
yeah, I think I tried earlier. Yeah. Hopefully it will work now.
School teach.
That's perfect.
School teaches us that we can do anything if we try. Well, I wanted to be an athlete, an Olympic athlete. And so I tried at that. I trained hard, and after a few years I started winning medals, representing my club, school, county, region. I medalled at national events. I was still hungry to improve and training harder than ever. At 17, I made the top 5 athletes under the age of 20 for my event in the UK and was being considered for European level competition. I was happy. And then I got injured. Stress fractures in my spine left me with chronic back pain, which was getting worse and worse, so I had to stop. I had to quit. I found it difficult to transition to a life outside of sport. I'd lost my sense of identity. I felt lost, empty, passionless. I felt like I'd wasted my big chance. I felt like a failure. Fast forward to now. I've found a new passion. I go to music events, concerts and festivals and see artists perform amazing music. They inspire me to write my own music, like the music you're listening to right now. I think school got it backwards. It's not you can do anything if you try. It's you can try and do anything. Because I now believe that effort is success. And I'm happier now than I've ever been.
You're now on mute, Antonia.
Sorry, I think there is a glitch in my system that if I'm sharing the audio from the slides, I can't unmute myself. So I had to do this again. So we know how it works. I hope you can see the slides and you can hear me now. I was just saying, I'm sure that just by watching this short example, you can see how interesting is this type of media, and thinking about the process, how important it is for this particular storyteller, how important was for this particular storyteller to shape his own narrative by having a dialogue and a constant feedback loop with all the other participants. And they were all somehow linked with each other by a common interest on the theme that they were exploring. Just to give you a short definition of why I think storytelling and the key principles of my approach to participatory storytelling, I always try to think about this practice as something to really unpack complexity and amplify those hidden voices, silent voices and hidden stories in this co-creative exercise that I can tell you is very often quite intense. Very often emotions emerge in a strong and unexpected way, but it's really rewarding for both the facilitator involved in this process and all the participants. There is an element I was reflecting on, that is defining what collaboration is within this process. Very often we think only about the technical collaboration, so supporting each other in making the film. But actually in my practice, I realized that it's important to collaborate with our partners, stakeholders, participants since the beginning of the design of the project itself, to define the objectives together, to make this process even more effective and impactful. And of course, trying to implement co-design techniques and define objectives together with the institutions we work with the partners we are somehow invited to work with sometime. it's tricky. There are certain barriers and in terms of time commitment, time and access to technology are very often the main barrier to the access to this practice of digital storytelling. And my work is actually to overcome those barriers. Collaboration during the process is essential. In particular, in my opinion, thinking about the plurality of everything we encounter. So the plurality of the voices, the plurality of the emotions, the diverse range of perspectives that this exercise make even more obvious and evident, even contradictions. So narratives are brilliant to make contradictions emerge, but also to reconcile where those contradictions are emerging. And something I really like is the power of stories as output to really inform decision-making and policy-making. And I have many examples I could share with you in which the stories were shared and of course, appreciated in the public domain with politicians, policymakers, and really generated a different impact compared to any type of written output that I ever produced before in other projects where I didn't include digital stories to support arguments or statements. But as I said, there are barriers in the implementation of this approach. And sometimes there is some skepticism about this notion of dismantling knowledge hierarchies. That is one of the pillars of this practice as well. You can imagine how important in this co-creation effort is the trying to disrupt power dynamics in the space. And I've been working a lot with practitioners and artists and professional staff in trying to see how different creative techniques, and you can see in these pictures, for example, storyboarding techniques, as ways of shifting certain conventions within the creative process as well, and enhancing the collaborative element. I was just touching upon my experience, the experience that was quite transformative for me that I had last year in New Zealand. I was acting as an advisory board member for a project, and I'm sharing them these links with you and of course in the chat later. It's a project that is led by colleagues at the University of Otago in Wellington, New Zealand. And I'm going to share now one of the stories that was made by one of the participants during the story circle. You see here, we were in the story circle. It was actually a practice story circle to then facilitate the actual workshop with the Maori community. So the main objective of this project that is still ongoing very successfully is to use digital storytelling techniques and storytelling at different levels to understand and inform better practices in the process of supporting patients who are using opioids in reducing the use of opioids. And it's all based on first-person narratives. That I'm going now to stop sharing for a second so that I can mute myself and share the audio from the computer.
I don't think we're seeing your screen, Antonia.
Sorry.
Pain has been with me for as long as I can remember. It was just a part of life, part of everything I did. I loved doing ballet, I loved dancing, cycling, cricket. It wasn't until after my daughter was born that things began to change. pain was an intruder and it stole everything. My body was a traitor and I hated it. The more I lost, the more depressed I became, the angrier I became, and I felt like I was being dragged out by a riptide and the waves were crashing over me. I couldn't seem to surface. I didn't realise that what I was experiencing was grief. The loss of the hopes, the dreams, a life lost. That's how it felt. Like I'd stopped living. Couldn't stay this way forever. I had to let it all go. I had to stop and breathe. Pain can control you, but you can take that control back. So now, I breathe.
So I'm back here, sharing again the slides. In the meantime, I just wanted to reflect with you about this particular narrative, but also the whole experience I had with this particular group of patients. The storyteller you just heard, the story was created in a sort of pre-story circle session that we had to plan and design together the actual workshop that we were planning to do with the wider community. And it was incredible because we were just trying out a few techniques. And then by the night, I went back in my hotel and this storyteller, she sent 2 stories already completed. And this made me think about how that person realized that she now had the new language, a new tool for her to express her experience in the everyday life. And the other surprising thing that happened just after one short session, was a 2-hour session, is that this particular patient, the day after, she wanted to co-facilitate the session with me. So realize how important her experience of knowing the content, the subject matter, and being closer to the subject that we were exploring could have been positive for the participants to unpack their own narrative. And we did something fantastic with them, some different exercises in the story circle, even creating a sort of inner circle for more intimate exchange, and an outer circle for wider conversations at the end of this story, like telling a story listening loop that we generally create in the story circle. So we've been adjusting with them the process as well, to try and think at different techniques and let's say short activities that could potentially provide the same intensity that the full co-creative process can generate. And here, just as a collage or picture to give you an idea of the wide spectrum of field of application of this technique. I've got from the top left a project in India on mental health, bottom left a project in the US on formal education and the use of digital storytelling, in the center one with colleagues from Latin America around museum education. Top corner right is the Landscape Architecture World Congress, and we've been using digital storytelling to plan for the best, for future scenarios in the urban environment. And bottom right, something that was another transformative experience about waste management in the Nairobi slum of Korogocho, and using, again, digital storytelling to generate impact at policy level and sensitize the local communities around to live next to this massive dumping site. So that's just an overall overview of the whole digital storytelling process, what the digital story is, a couple of examples of stories that were created by patients affected by chronic pain. And here I'm just sharing very briefly, but I'm happy for you to actually listen carefully and deeply to the feedback received at the end of a few workshops, digital storytelling workshops. And the overall takeaway message that I get very often is that people, they feel they don't get information when they're not subject, they're not the ones receiving information by going through this process, but they become the new creators and curators of knowledge. So it's shifting the dynamics about who is the person in charge of sharing the knowledge and actually validating the importance and the value of our everyday experience and experiential knowledge to inform better decision making. And as you can imagine, this is applicable in different fields. And but I'm now very, very happy to launch a new project in collaboration with Flipping Pain and the support of the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. Is an impact acceleration account project that we are doing at Teesside University with Flipping Pain and a theatre company in the northeast of England. And we are trying to combine digital stories with a piece of theatre. So bringing the voices, of the patients, of the people who are expert in the experience of chronic pain onto the stage, and then touring around this piece of theatre with potentially some short films embedded into the performance as well. And also using the short films, digital storytelling as a potential evaluation tool of the impact of those creative activities on people's well-being as well. And that's the end of this short introduction to digital storytelling. That is not just a technique I apply in my research and for public engagement, but it's actually my main passion. I'm really passionate about this tool because I strongly believe in the real. I have witnessed so many times how effective this approach is and how transformative can be on individuals' life and the wider audience. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting, and I think the videos are so powerful. And good to see that progression of journeys in such a short space of time. I know certainly for our kind of client group and people with persistent pain, there can be that feeling of isolation and not knowing. And I think the videos really show that kind of broad, actually, there might be loss, but also that ability to see that there can be allow space for something more after, and it's not that their stories can also take a turn. And I suppose we have a question linked to that, to how might we use this approach to engage those harder to reach communities living with pain, and how can we use digital storytelling for that? So that's the ambition of digital storytelling, is to actually work with what we would define hard to reach. And the way of involving those communities, and this can be applied in any field. I've been working, as I said, in slums in Africa and East Africa, but also in other situations all over the globe. And for example, the Maori community in that project was a hard to reach community because they were somehow not used to be involved in a research process, if not as subject of research. So, but the secret, in my mind, is to actually expand the interest around how to create a narrative that is effective in such a powerful and meaningful way. And creating, when I was referring to the train the trainers approach, I was thinking, we don't need to have me to do this all the time. We need to create a community of practice of people who are part of those communities, and they are the ones who can run those sessions. So, for example, the story we just had, that patient,
she was a patient, and the day after she was a digital storytelling facilitator. So we really need to create those opportunities for the people who traditionally were recruited to actually promote those new practices that we have evidence that they are effective, much more effective than other ways of making those. Because there was another comment I was reading earlier about, there is something that is therapeutic in this process as well. So when I was alluding in my title, the healing power of storytelling, I was thinking about, everything I witness every time, and it's therapeutic for me as well, is that sense of added layer of well-being that this co-creative and sharing space generates in such a short time. This morning I had a session here in Rome, and after 30 minutes, they were just one friend of the other one. It's just that incredible connection that you can simply create by dismantling our professional barriers, because we are all somehow wearing our hat and we forget that we need to just put in the trash. You know what I mean? It's like we need to find that common ground that stories are brilliant to create. And there are different techniques that we can make available to facilitate the entry point, because the start is not easy. So people, they tend to say, oh, I don't have a story, I don't have anything to share. Unless you ask them different things. You don't ask them to create a story. You ask them to bring an object. You ask them to bring a photograph, and then to unpack the meaning of that particular photograph. And for example, in the second story we just watched, the photograph was the photo of the dog. So if you remember the story, so the dog is the peak, is the freedom, is the representation of that independence, that autonomy that the person had to earn through the difficulties over time. So it's like that. It's much harder to say, can you tell me the whole journey? It's much easier to say, bring an object that is representing the values of your journey. And that entry point makes everything much easier.
I think it also helps, or it sounds like it helps to remind that individuals that they're more than just their pain, or more than just a patient coming into a clinician, that actually they have lots of other life roles, and this is an added life role that they can then use in order to help.
Absolutely. There is a second story I didn't share because I was afraid to be late at the end. And this is the second story that the same patient made. And the key message is that now I'm no longer just a patient with pain. I just regained my own identity beyond the pain I have. So it's just that shift in focus. And narratives are beautiful for this, because, when we talk about the narrative arc, change is the key moment for creating this wave of emotions in the narrative arc. So thinking about this, sort of rising action, and then there is the change happening, and then we go towards the resolution in the end. So it's like thinking about those waves of emotions that we can create and facilitate throughout the process, and also thinking about which emotions could be the most, let's say, informative. Seems like an oxymoron, like a paradox, that an emotion can be informative. It actually is, because by hearing, I don't know if you heard the breaking of the voice of the storyteller, she didn't want to redo the voiceover. She loved that, because that was her authentic way of talking about that particular. You could do the voiceover several times, 10 times, and just edit out that moment. But actually, that's the moment that makes her story connected with many, many other people going through the same feeling, the feeling of anger. Can we talk about anger? It's just, how do we do that? How do we represent that?
Thank you. There's also then a comment from Kate to say thank you, Antonia, that was so moving. And I can see the links with psychological therapy, cognitive reframing, and values work, and helping with acceptance work as well. You can really see how it can bring all of that together and be used in many different areas as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and for when you're away in Rome as well.
Naomi has a raised hand, Claire.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't see that. Apologise.
That was amazing, just really moving and inspiring. And I was just wondering, as a clinician, it would be just so amazing to be able to bring some of that to some of the patient groups that we're working with. And I was just thinking, well, technically there's a lot of barriers to that. Is there any way that we can use simple technology? We all have an iPhone or some sort of device where we can record things, but I think just the thought of how do we actually simplify the technology or provide a toolkit that would actually spread this.
Absolutely. And that's what my research is about, how we simplify things in a way to make it accessible. For example, now we use a cloud-based software for video editing that allows also remote collaboration. So for example, this last patient who created her story, she did it by herself. And then she asked me to just log in and see what she was doing and help edit her story, deciding together what to keep and what to discard, for example. And this saved a lot of time in terms of doing the editing together. Even if I'm a big supporter of the slowness of the editing and the crafting of the narrative, because I think in that slow rhythm and slow pace is where something very important can emerge, that we acquire that sense of confidence in our own narrative that takes some time as well. But of course, there are techniques that we could suggest and use to make this tool more and more accessible. And this is my desire, my dream scenario. But we can. So, for example, there was one of the pictures of the storyboards. I did an exercise in Kenya, and we did that in 30 minutes. So instead of doing the whole film, they were just working on a storyboard, crafting the key blocks of their narrative, and then recording the story verbally while they were holding the storyboard, which of course is saving time, but you don't miss the beauty of the creative element and the thinking while making, which is another important component. So thinking while making something, it's important to concretize difficult narrative somehow. And thinking about the complexity, something we work a lot with the storytellers is in making them aware about the interaction between the different languages, the verbal language, the visual language, the sound. You could hear the sound of the sea, the waves in the last story, or the music in the young person who was describing his journey as an athlete first, and then becoming passionate about composing music, electronic music. So it's thinking about what are these different layers that can somehow unpack the complexity of all our emotions, which are linked to our everyday life experience. But thank you. That's a great question.
Thank you so much, Antonio. That's been really, really interesting, really great to hear from you. And thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We will now